Welcome to the Vietnamese. I'm your host, Kenneth Nguyen. Being part of a culture of nearly 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today comes with a lot of pain, proud history, and privilege. Join me as I highlight and explore the Vietnamese experience from all over the world. Dan Vo is the manager of the 6-time Grammy Award-winning rapper Apple D, co-founder of the Black Eyed Peas. He talks about connecting his and Apple's culture to mainstream entertainment in the next decade. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for coming on. Tell me about your evolution to becoming the Vietnamese person that you are today.
I think it took me to move back to Vietnam to really become to think about being Vietnamese. When my parents are refugees and they came in 75, just like a lot of other families and parents, and in the 80s and stuff, I think it was very much about not recognizing the old country. Like they still cared, like we still spoke the language and ate the food and everything. I wasn't born until 87, and so they were pretty Americanized by the time I came around. But a lot of it just became like that other place. And so whatever they remember of Vietnam 75 was just that. The country never doesn't evolve. There are no new people, whatever. That was there, keep that timeline. And that's how Vietnam was to me for a long time. Even when I went and visited in 2000 with my mom, and when I was in middle school, and it was still very developing, right? Like the US had just kind of let them out of the whole WTO fiasco, and so there's still dirt roads everywhere, and it was still very like soda was sold in a bag, and and you're just like, oh, this is not the same country that I live in now. Like, thank gosh we left. And I think it took like actually living there and seeing like the day-to-day of things and being like, oh, it's different. It's not behind. There are parts that are definitely a little slower, developed in the US, but they're not behind. It's just a different experience, And then once you start being able to like put things in that level, then I started to go, okay, I got to go figure out what this part of my life was that I missed for so long.
What made you decide to move to Vietnam?
Just needing to see something different. I had grown up in Southern California my whole life. I went, all of elementary, except for like a short stint in Ohio. Like I had lived primarily here, went to college here, and I had wanted to be a journalist at some point in my life. And when I was in college, my sister and her husband were journalists up in the Bay. And I was thinking like, oh, they'll get me in somewhere, I'll intern, and then I'll go write sports and whatever. And I remember my third year of college calling them, and they're like, we're getting out of this industry. Like print's going to die like really quickly. And so you should, you want to do it. That's great, but it's going to be a really tough struggle. And so then I just got through college unsure of what I wanted to do, and was like, all right, well, I just need to see something,
What did you study in college?
I was studying English and film. Film was like just secondary. I had gone to Long Beach, and a lot of the English courses were like, you could take these screenwriting courses that will count, or you could take this like poetry, like 406. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to take the film classes. Like, like I'm going to go watch film and write. I'd rather do that. And it was a more prestigious college, university, because I was like, it was like one of Spielberg's schools. I know USC is like his alma mater, but he had like put a lot of money, and so then the school was named after him. And so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna like take advantage of these humanity courses and go study some film. And
Long Beach,
and all my interesting classmates in my English classes were also doing film, so like we'd get to sit around and watch a bunch of
You said you went to Cal State Long Beach, you said?
Yeah, so I went there, but I transferred there. So I was going to community college at Mount Sac and Walnut, and then I went to Long Beach afterwards. And yeah, so I was studying film, and I took the LSATs because like every English student takes the LSATs. Like my parents were like, "Oh, you could be a lawyer," and I was like, "Sure, that doesn't sound bad." So I took the LSATs, and then interned at a immigration firm for a while, and it's like I don't know if I want to do this. And so then I was like, oh, I could go teach abroad for a while. And I was like looking at different schools in Vietnam. Actually pays really well for people that are thinking about teaching English abroad, because they were learning Russian for so long, right? For like from 75 to like 89, they were like, we are not learning English, we're going to learn Russian. And then after the Soviet Union fell, they were like, oh, okay, we're way behind on this international world thing. So then they started paying people. In Vietnam was like one of the nicer countries that you can make a decent living teaching English. It was like that, or the Middle East, or like there's not many countries that pay really well to be able to live there. So I went to Vietnam.
So you get to Vietnam and you don't know anybody, basically, right?
No, nobody.
You get there, teach English, but you're not doing anything in the entertainment industry, or you don't have your ear to the ground or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I didn't think about it in that way. I didn't think about it as a Viet Q necessarily. I was like, I went there, and so like all the other English teachers are travelers, mostly white, and so that's kind of the crowd I hung out in. And I would notice things that I thought were really cool. And like I started to love the country a lot more just while getting to live there, right? And getting to see this stuff. But I never really thought like, oh, I want to shoot a movie, or I want to get into music out here. It was just like, oh, there's actually some decent music, or there's some really good movies that I saw, that I would have had no idea about had I not lived there and walked by a movie theater every day.
Yeah, and it's so weird, bizarre to me, because like the context of how you and I know each other is really film and music, right? That world.
Mm-hmm.
That's my existence. And when I think of Vietnam, I think of the entertainment business predominantly in my head, because all of our friends that came in 2000, the early days all came from LA or Orange County. And so when we meet people across, in Vietnam, it's predominantly for me entertainment business. But to meet you going to Vietnam in the early days in 2007 and being an English teacher and have you have no reason to be there other than whatever you're there for, but nothing to do with entertainment, is just mind blowing to get from that point to where you are today. And I can't wait to get into that story.
Yeah, it's quite a skip. It's quite a weird skip, Yeah, I think I was there like trying to see the place that, my parents had fled, trying to learn some things and trying to make some money. And it was like I could spend, my early 20s entry leveling at, this economy that was being decimated, right? Like we had just kind of come out of 2008, and everybody that I was, especially in the English world, was like still working as a barista or still as a bartender, and it was fine. But I was like, I could skip all that and I could go do this for a while and live like royalty on a dollar, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I did that.
So you did that for 2 years, you said?
Yeah, so I did that for a little, like 2 years, 2.5 years, something around that line.
Yeah, what made you say, all right, I'm done with this?
I didn't actually think I was going to be done with it. I think I came back to visit. I came back to California to visit my family, and I was about to apply. I was applying at different countries because I was going to do it again, but I was like, I should get out of Vietnam and go see some stuff. And I was interviewing for Istanbul for this college there. And I was on a road trip with a friend across the country. Like I had landed in LA, and then we were driving to Boston. And at some point in Utah, I'm doing this like interview, and CNN's playing behind me on this like Zoom conference. And there was an attack in Istanbul. Like there was some guy went and shot up a tourist spot. And I was like, do you see what's happening on your side of the world right now? And the guys are like, no, what's going on? And I'm like, there's a lot of people getting shot right now. Like I'm like watching this in real time as I'm doing this interview. And and after that, my dad sits and talks to me. He's like, do you want to be an English teacher forever? And he was very like career oriented of me. And I go, I was like, no, like this is a way to see the world and do some stuff. And I like dabbled in probably these things that could have kept me there long, like kept me traveling abroad longer had I been more entrepreneurial at the time, but was like, I should probably, kind of get settled back into America and, start whatever my professional journey was going to be. And so then I just stayed after that.
And then you just stayed, and what happens? Like what goes on in your mind at that time? You're just like, just got back from Vietnam, and what are you going to apply for?
I was just hopping careers for a minute. Like I was, that law firm that I had interned for, I had like gone back in because I wanted some writing samples for some things that I had written for the Ninth Circuit. And they go, well, if you want a day job, you could just work here for a minute and then, do whatever you want to do. So I was doing that. I was working there in the daytime. Some friends and I had like started a nonprofit for racing at that point. We'd started a videography business at some point. And so then it was just kind of like throwing darts everywhere, just trying to make sense of all of this, because now I was 25, which is still considerably young in hindsight. But at the time, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a 25-year-old entry-level marketer, or, whatever my job title I was going to have. And I was like, no, I might as well just start, kind of dabbling and doing 20 things at once and seeing what sticks. And I think I've been kind of doing that ever since,
And where does it go from there into music?
Music is by accident. Music was a complete accident to me. I was in cars before. I was building those Fast and the Furious body kit on like lowered Civics and stuff for a company. And the cool thing about the automotive world is it's a real fraternity, so you get to meet all these really cool people. The industry itself is terrible, but the people that are also in the cars are great. And so I was meeting a lot of people, turned that job into an agency job, met Apple and his manager at the time, this guy named Audie, and they were never my clients, but like, because Apple is Filipino, always looked back at Asia as like what's happening next. And then I would talk to them about my experience of living in Vietnam and what I saw, and I'm just like, people, like the sheer population of everything still blows my mind. And I think as the world starts opening up, and becoming more globalized and everything, that's what we got to explain. I'm like, you spend so much money trying to make it in LA, which is cool, but I was working at a digital marketing agency, so I used to have to explain like cost of acquisitions and stuff, and cost per clicks. And I was like, it's maybe 40, 50 cents if you can do it well per user in the US, but we can just cheat code this and go to Philippines. Do you care where your million views come from? And he was like, no, not really. And I'm like, great, because for $100, I will get you 1 million views in the Philippines like that, like it's not a big deal. And I was like, if you make it in Manila or you make it in Saigon, I was like, Saigon is 2 New Yorks, like at least 2 New Yorks, and everybody is 30 or younger.
A penny for that click on Facebook ads.
Exactly. It's a penny for the click. And they are so a little behind on figuring out what the internet is, like, and the exact use of the internet. So all of this is way cheaper, but that divide is it's lessening every day.
How long were you doing the agency work for before you met Apple?
I was in the agency for maybe a month. I wasn't there.
You started, or you were working for somebody? I
was working for somebody at this point. They had hired that videography group that my friends and I had started. They had hired them, or they had hired the group to be their videography agents or group. And I was more of like an account exec, I guess. So like I was doing a lot more project managing, but I would like hold the camera, I'd do this. And I was like one of the only ones that had, I might have been the only one that had like graduated college. There's only a couple of us that had graduated college in that agency. And so they were like, you go do those kinds of meetings for us. So they would stick me in these rooms that like they weren't my clients and I had no real business communicating with, but like Apple and I got along and Audie and I got along. And then the agency was terrible. So I like left one day and I was like gonna leave, and I'm talking to Audie and I'm like, I could use a letter of rec. And he was like, oh, just come over here. Like, take whatever you're doing, just bring it over here and just hang out with us for a while. And so I got my job. I've been here for almost 5 years now. This will be my 5th year.
The kind of luck that happens in a human being's life is
seriously.
I see it over and over and over in the stories. I used to think luck had nothing to do with anything, right? When I was growing up, I was like, fuck luck. It doesn't mean shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you get to a point where it's okay, maybe it's like a few percentage points of your success. And then I got to a point where it's like 50% of your success is luck, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't look at it that way anymore. I think it's an overwhelming majority, 80 to 90% of a person's success.
It's all luck. It's being prepared for when that lucky moment hits you, but it's luck. You know what I mean? Like your parents, they come to America, they don't, like, your life is completely different, you know? Like, you could have done everything the same in your set of, like, you could have made every same decision, but growing up where you grew up changes everything, you know?
Who you're born into too.
Yeah, exactly. Who you're born into, what random party you decided to go to, and who you meet, and that whole world.
Yeah, it's like the most random thing. But now there's two things that are standing out in my brain right now about you. The car culture, and we talked about the sneaker culture.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably a lot of parallels between the two cultures, but why is the sneaker culture, and I want to know this because I don't know it.
Yeah.
Why is it so important in the world of I don't know, inner city, or why is it such a thing?
I think, like, it's always been a thing. Like, there's, like, in music and hip hop especially, right? Like Jordans and Air Maxes, and it's a status symbol in the cities, especially in, like, New York, right? Like, the shoes become something, and this it's like film and everything. It's the story of what makes the shoe, and its context and history that'll, like, let it live on, right? Like, Jordan hasn't played a meaningful game in 25 years, but kids are, like, all about that. They're buying shoes that they have no idea what they are, and it's because somebody's told a story, or somebody, especially like early rappers, they, like, explain their struggle and their hustle to get these pairs of shoes, right? Like, this dude sold $300 worth of drugs when he was 16 and decided to buy a pair of shoes over something else, and then that becomes revered, and then it became a resale game at a lot of various points. So a lot of, like, entrepreneurs, especially when you're younger and from the city, then it's all about kind of hustling that, right? Buying $100 pair of the shoes and selling it for 150, buying 2 pairs, selling one so you can keep the other ones for free, and I think that becomes a big part of the culture. And then it becomes an extension of art also, right? Like the colorways, the materials, the scarcity, the only way to really acknowledge that, right, to communicate to somebody else, like, yeah, I know what's going on because I'm wearing these shoes, right? So you're communicating, and it becomes like at a party, you're just like, yeah, that person knows what's up. It's a way to, like, yeah, exactly. It's a way to kind of represent yourself to the world, to communicate that you're about this culture.
I can imagine that there's levels to this shit too, right? To the game.
There are crazy levels. And social media has really changed things. Like, when I was in high school and college, I was buying shoes, and I remember spending like $100 on a pair of shoes, and my family's just looking at me like, what are you doing? I'm like, no, those resell for like what, $200, right? And they were like, after you've worn them, they're still going to resell for $200. And I was like, yeah, as long as I wear them a couple of times only or whatever. I remember one time coming home with a pair of $1,500 shoes. I was Nikes. I was 18. I was going to community college, and my dad's looking at me like, you spent what? They're called the pairs, if you ever find them. They're these Nike Dunk skateboarding shoes. They were $1,500 at the time. And I sold them. I wore them maybe once, and I sold them for like $2,000, maybe 3 years later, and it was like genius. Now $80,000.
Oh my God.
You could, like, I had this like massive collection of shoes that when I moved to Vietnam, I sold off a bunch, right? Because I was trying to be a minimalist, and I was trying to like think about I was trying to think about like I only want to have the possessions that can fit in a suitcase. Like that's my life, or in a bag. And now I'm like, I could have bought a house on just
Shoes.
a third of my collection, not even like my whole thing. And there's things like Travis Scott will wear a pair of shoes and he'll put them on an Instagram story, and the value will go up $1,000 or up 2,000. And they're just random shoes. And he's like in his 20s, I believe, is trying to rep shoes from the mid 2000s when, because he's like, I'm an OG because I wanted these shoes when I was 14 and couldn't afford them. And here they are, you know? And so he's trying to communicate or hearken that he knows what's up.
That's like that's a meta shit, right? Because
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I belong to that when
Yeah,
like it's some inception shit. Like
it is. And so now there are people who are holding entire collections and stockpiles of stuff, waiting for a dude to tweet or Instagram story with his outfit and it changing the value of whatever. It's just it makes no sense, but you know, it's what it is. It's crazy.
are you still into the car culture and the sneaker culture?
I am a little older though, but like I have this struggle because I know how little like anybody gets paid on the process of this, you know? And so like when I had moved to Vietnam, I brought like all my cool Air Maxes with me and stuff like that. I was like, man, I'm gonna be flossing on this. And I remember my secretary at the school was like, don't wear those shoes. Like they're like they treat people so terribly. And I knew about fast fashion, but I never really thought about fast fashion, you know? And and then like when I was living in Vietnam, I had to go see it. I had to go be like, where are they making this? Like, what are the living? And so like starting to gain perspective of like, this really did cost $1 to make. You know, there's a dude in New York who got stabbed on these shoes for what a kid made for $1, maybe. You know, it's just it's weird. It's like you want to be conscious and you want to like be like a good sustainable consumer and stuff, and you want to preach and practice these things. But yeah, I still like shoes and I still like cars, unfortunately. These things that are like not great for the economy. And with like our people in like a major disproportion of like the bad end of this, right? Like we have no benefit from this except I'm like, yeah, but that dude at the McDonald's, he saw me, you know, he saw me wear this rare colorway when I got out of my car for 2 seconds to get a Big Mac. Like, it's so stupid.
Levels to everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a game.
So you Audie has you come over to work, and then like I can't imagine your first day. You're like, okay. I mean, was there like a sort of a talk about like, okay, here's your job description. Come on over. This is what you're gonna be doing for us, or just come chill at the pad, and then we'll find something for you to do.
It was more like the latter. Like there wasn't like a real job description. There was like the institute was like, he was like, all right, you can write, right? And I'm like, yeah, I could write. I could write decently well. I can write copy and I can write legal jargon and I can write all these things that I've like trained myself. And so if you want to make that my job description, like I'm gonna be the communicator. I'm gonna write your newsletters and your Instagram posts and whatever. I'll do that. And he was like, yeah, okay, just come hang out. So you just came hang out. I would just come hung out with him, and then I just never left. You know, he left at some point. Everybody's left, and it's just like, and at this point in time, it's just like it's Apple and I. I mean, there's a whole peas universe, you know, and we all that's bigger than this. But in terms of Apple and I, it's just Apple and I. So we're just sitting around like, man, what's going on? But in a good way. It's been cool. It's been a really fun job description so far, you know.
Yeah, I want to know more of it. So what exactly does this morph into?
It morphs into Yeah, it morphs into a lot of project management.
Okay.
Like that's probably the like the bones of what my job is, right? It's project management and ideation, and it's project management, but then some of the things like I have to actually design or think about. Some of these things are like, this is what's going on in the world today, like let's jump on this, or like wouldn't this be cool, and a lot of it comes over alcohol some days. We're just sitting around shooting the shits, having some tequila or something like that, and he goes, well, wouldn't it be cool if we had an apple pipe? Yes, it would be cool if we had an apple pipe. So now we have an apple pipe, and there are things like,
can you talk about that?
Can I talk about the apple pipe? Yeah. So the apple pipe is it's like a sort of, I'll show you. So it's just a little ceramic apple pipe, the bowls here, and everybody has everybody kind of has a story about smoking out of an apple at some point in their use. And for us, like we really like ceramics because glass just gets dirty, and as you get older, you can't really like have it displayed as much. So you're like hosting people, and you're like, hide the bong, hide the pipe. You're like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I'm in college again, like just hide all this stuff. And so we wanted to make stuff that you can leave around the house and would look like a home good, but you could also have some function out of it. And so we're doing, I don't know when this episode will be coming, but this red apple right here will be the first one that drops, and then we'll be treating them like colors, and we're going to treat them like sneakers essentially,
Wow.
So there'll be colorways, and there'll be we'll play with scarcity a bit. We'll do some artist series. We'll play with the packaging, and we're just gonna evolve this out. But this is number one.
See, Dan, I knew there was something more to you, man. This is so interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's been a lot of that. I think I had to like, I'd always liked design in projects. And so it became a thing of like, oh, I should just do all these things, I should just, and it like there's Vietnam, we do manufacturing. Like that's what we actually do, and I never, it took me so long to like put together that art and design were like this whole thing that is actually what makes the product, right? Like it never like really occurred to me what was going on. Like Nike, I'm like, these shoes are in no way the best for anything. They're just not. The colors are great, but the technology, it's like, even like what they're like, it's an old shoe from the 80s that are still selling for $80,000 today. I'm like, how, right? Except this resell inflated market. But yeah, they tell you it's a shoe from the 80s. It used to be a basketball shoe. That was not a good basketball shoe. It's like, it has no technology to it, but people will spend that. And so, yeah.
Oh, okay. So obviously Apple has the Apple name, but who came up with the idea to come out with this product?
It became a mixture of things. So Rosalina is actually was key in this. She was like, oh yeah, Apple. And we had been talking about it internally for a long time, and it had just been something that was like on the back burner of our projects list. And then so she introduced us to Brittany, and we started putting this together. And then we started thinking about like, well, what else can this be? An apple is cool, but how do you make somebody buy more than one? How do you evolve this? How do you get luxurious about this? How do you give back? How do you create social impact? How do you tell stories? Like, because that's what the apple is for us, right? Like we want to tell stories with it. And for a lot of people, like they kind of get the same thing. They pick it up and they tell their story about the first time they poked a hole in an apple and got high in mom's backyard. And we're like, we want that. We want the storytelling that comes from this, and we want all of our life stories and all of our culture points to kind of hit in this in different ways and stretch this out. So
And where are they? Who designed it? Where are they produced? How is it going to be distributed?
Um, so okay, I'm not going to say how it's being distributed or how it's being manufactured right now, but so Brittany, Rosalina's daughter, actually designed the first one for us, and then we've been. It took a lot of R&D into making like hole sizes and bowl sizes and things like that. So we've been working on that, and then distribution will mostly be e-commerce. Like we're partnering with a couple of dispensaries that will help with branding. Will help with like our marketing, but we really want to own this whole thing. Like in e-commerce makes it so much easier now to just distribute around and
Yeah,
keep the lion's share of the profits and build our own brand.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And what other projects like this have you gotten into?
Um, we have a product. So most of my work comes through the Philippines and trying to take Apple's fame and likeness over there and see how many ways we can do cool stuff. We're doing a sauce company, which is we're gonna make like a soy sauce and a vinegar and a fish sauce and stuff. So we're doing that. We're rebranding a Filipino supermarket, like their homeware design, like just like their house brands. And we want that trust. Like when we send our non-Filipino friends really into the supermarket, a lot of times the food is good, but the packaging is terrible, right? And so they're like looking at it going like, is this any good? Is like, am I going to get lead or something? And it's like, and that becomes all an exercise in art, right? Like, how do you get somebody to trust the Asian aisle at a grocery store or an entire Asian store? And how do you make like a 99 ranch or something become people of our generation's top of mind grocery store? Because that was like my parents, like now it's like my soy sauce selection is limited to what my Trader Joe's and my Pavilions is doing, and I'm like, how do you
Elevate.
Yeah, so we're working on that. We're working on a clothesline, and then we're working on sneakers. Yeah. Yeah.
So most of your work it sounds like it's project management, but what about like the music side of Apple's existence?
We have a song coming out. It's just Apple's and a K-pop singer that I can't talk about right now. But we're creating this solo album for Apple to talk to the Asian market again and make music that Asia wants to come around with. When I first met Apple, there was a record label that they created called Boombox, which was targeted towards the Southeast Asian market. And there's some cool investors on there, and there's some really cool people that came out of there. And ultimately, Jessica J. Ray Soul comes out of there, right? She becomes our first major person. But to develop her, we had to like bring her to America, which was an expensive endeavor, right? We've had her for 4 years. She's done really well. Things have worked out, but it took that. It took bringing her here, housing her, putting her in our facilities, putting her through a camp, and we don't want to do that again. So we're like, we're using Apple's album to kind of begin conversations again with Asia and see, because the music market in Asia has changed so much in a good way. It's just evolved, I think, so much farther than even like the first 5 years, when I first got in here and was like looking what was out there. There's just so much better music today. And we want to play that.
Before we go further, I want to ask about bringing somebody like a J. Ray. It takes a lot of you say it's expensive, and you say it was something that you don't want to repeat again. I can totally see why, but even before you even brought J. Ray in, it's like to do that to anyone, to bring them in from Asia, they have to come with a certain understanding of, because when you hear J. Ray speak, you kind of don't know that she grew up in the Philippines, and
Mhm.
like she,
Yeah.
for all you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
could have grew up in New York. You
Mhm.
really, it's indistinguishable. I guess that's what I'm getting at. If you wanted to bring a Vietnamese pop star from Vietnam to the US to do that sort of transition,
Mhm.
that would be, in my head, likely impossible to do.
It's hard. And like K-pop always fascinates me because they were able to make something so popular speaking a language that 95% of the world doesn't speak, like I was in Chicago last year, and I happened to be there when BTS had done like a 3-day event. And the plane, when I was flying back to LA, like everyone on that plane had a BTS hoodie. It was crazy. And most of them weren't Asian, there was black and whites and Hispanics and everybody. And I'm just like, you don't even understand what they're saying. Like, except for like the parcel of English that they put in the chorus deliberately, you don't know anything that they're saying. And they're like, they don't care. And I mean, that's kind of the beauty of his music, that you can do that in a way. But I think it takes a lot of government support, right? Like, knowing what you know about South Korea and the entertainment industry, it was all a very deliberate
They
effort.
were all in.
They were all in, right? Like, the government has paid and not cut corners, but like really established a foothold to make all, K-pop and K-drama and stuff like that a real thing, because you can sell product through that, right? Once you're able to communicate language with people like that, or communicate culture, then you can start pushing stuff and getting a bigger market share. And that battle goes on with everything. Indonesia is starting to do it now. Like, they're like the Indonesian government starting to put money into like cultural places like Complex Con. And they have there's a group called 88 Rising that's big, Indonesian based. So it is possible for Vietnam, but it takes infrastructure. It takes a lot of coordination from every end to make it work. You got to have products that you want to push. Like, it's great that you make a Vietnamese music video or something like that. You want to make sure like whatever's in that music video is helping the economy move along.
Yeah,
But
I can't wait. I hope that there will be a day that the Vietnamese music industry exports out to just not only the US but to the world, right? The way the
I hope so. And you see, like, I mean, what you guys are doing and what's happening in movies is really cool. That seems to be the first pillar that I can see some noticeable movement.
Yeah.
Music is going to be a little bit of a struggle, but it'll get there. I hope so, but it'll take some real it'll take some real coordination, I think, on a lot of parts. And producers can really make that go faster.
Yeah, there's a facility.
Yeah.
But like a J Ray is is so probably I don't know the evolution of her training, but to have a J Ray level performer from Vietnam come over and do years and become that kind of like at that level, it's mind blowing to me to see the again, like I said, it feels like she's from New York or something, and just plucked her from New York and put her right into the formula, and she's like rocking and rolling.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of behind the scenes work, right? I'm going to embarrass her, but it's like, if you Google early Jessica Reynoso, because Apple discovered her on The Voice,
right?
And she was, a kid, and she had this big afro and this whole thing. And she was a child singer. She was on like singing shows when she was 5. But it takes a lot of development. I mean, she's an anomaly, and she's so talented just by herself. Like, I've watched her sing Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey stuff and Ariana Grande, and she just has no problem. It's like not a challenge to her. She'll just sit there, like, we'll be driving in a car and she'll be
knock it out.
Just nailing runs, and you're like, okay, like, she's an anomaly for sure.
Yeah.
And she's super talented. But there could be people that come from Vietnam, and I hope so. I hope, like, I hope the internet opens up something to Vietnam, and seeing how other music around the world is going.
I mean, if you think about it, right? If you think about the mainstream Billboard,
Mhm.
there's no, I mean, other than the K-pop sensation, there's really no Asian American like heavy hitting like Apple or J Ray. I mean, even within the Filipino community, those two are the probably the biggest names, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple like, well, like Bruno Mars is
Oh yeah.
huge, but he's like, he happens to be Filipino, right? Like he's not like a product of the Philippines. He's
Philippines,
from
yeah.
Hawaiian child songs and stuff like that. They have more like classic ones, like Lea Salonga.
Yeah.
She did Miss Saigon and stuff. And she's a big deal of that ilk, but not pop star billboards like that. Yeah, it's still coming, but I think it'll happen sooner than later.
And is it important for our community or for our society in the Vietnamese context to have somebody cross over, or fuck it, let's just stay with our 95 million in country and let's just haul ass and kick ass and be big there? Is it important to cross over?
I think it's important to cross over to show that it's possible, right? Like I always like believed all those things were really corny about oh, it's about community and supporting and all these things that like I like did not want to like really like I would do it privately, but I was not trying to like be out on the front lines embracing it. But it is important that it's possible, right? It is important that people know that you can do this, and not even just from like trying to tell somebody to be a pop star is like one of the most irresponsible things you can ever do, right? But having people understand that like your child is an artist and like is into painting or music or whatever is not a death sentence, right? Like this is one of the only economies that still works in the US, or wherever. Like content is a big, big thing. And so it's not a death sentence, but you got to figure out how to take that kid's interest in something and help nurture it, I think, and I think having some crossover appeal works for people over like Vietnamese parents in America who might be coming up with this, who might like have a kid coming up and going, I can't support my child going into the arts, like that's not for me. And it's like, no, people make a really good living doing this, and you'll like let your kid be happy, which is what you probably want in the first place, right? Just show them the backbone of all of this. We pay tons of money to sample music, so
It's hard to come from a survivor sort of generation and cross over and be like, oh, there's like an abundance in the creative side. That's hard. It's a hard mental process to kind of, it's a threshold that you have to kind of like really jump into the deep end and go, oh no, it's possible. It's very possible. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one, but it's something that I think it's something that like we have to be able to be better at telling that the story and the process of, right? In the Philippines, in 2018, Apple and I were like going around the country and like trying to do these like creative meetups and stuff like that. And we were answering that topic question, right? Like parents would ask, well, my kid wants to be a creative. How do I kind of stop this, right? Or like, what does this mean? And, we're like, it's a giant economy. It helps. But like, if you know everybody on the line, like, sorry to bring it back to sneakers, but like, there's up in the Bay, we have a friend named Mark who helped design some of these like Nikes that were really special, like those Nike SDBs, like those $80,000 shoes and stuff. So that was designed by, he's Filipino, super Filipino dude. And then they were made in Asia for $1, and all the working conditions, terrible work conditions. And then it was brought back here. And then some of our friends, we have a friend named Christina, who is now the person that heads Rihanna's companies like Fenty and stuff. It's a Filipino lady, marketing these shoes to be sold back into Asia for USD, right? Like $150 or whatever, when their cousin made it for $1, and all that money goes to US, and then it gets shelved here, right? And so like in no part of the process were we properly compensated for this stuff, right? But it's like all creative people all down the line. And that happens in music, that happens in film, and that happens everywhere. And it's just about getting that conversation, you know what I mean, to out there and be like, yeah, there's more of us. Like at dinner last week, like those are probably some of the most successful people, right? Like just all around in a circle. Like it was such a beautiful thing, right? But like we probably all grew up very similarly. If not for Tony to like opening that up to us, you would not think. But like he inspired, how many people, but like 20 people at least at that table alone.
Yeah, thousands. He's probably influenced thousands of people.
Yeah, no, like we showed. I like took an Asian studies course in college, and they showed that movie. They showed 3 seasons, so, and she was showing that for whatever, since her tenure, for like, that was probably a decade after the movie came out. So she was showing that movie to every class and everything, and people were coming out of there over and over and over. Like, it's huge, and that's the power of it all. But it's important to get some kind of representation, some kind of recognition.
Yeah, sometimes I get fatigued talking about representation. I know I shouldn't be saying that, but it's because it's a privilege to even have the ability to talk about representation, right? So that's it's kind of fucked up that I even said that, but right?
No, but it's true. It's totally true. Like it means something.
Yeah,
it means something.
But it's almost like, why can't we just all be recognized? But we're not. It's just not. We're not recognized, and we're not. The doors aren't wide open for people of color.
Yeah.
But it gets tiring. Fuck. It just gets tiring to get, because like my wife grew up in Taiwan. My brother now lives in Vietnam for close to 20 years now. There's none of that shit going on there. It's like hegemonic. It's just one big massive monolith of inside Vietnam, and they don't have to deal with these struggles that we're going through.
Yeah, but it's like in like Vietnam, like they're like, oh yeah, you put a Vietnamese person on screen, like, yeah, people are going to be able to support that because they can see themselves, right? And it's like, it's weird that it doesn't happen in Asia, but like every other statistic tells you, like, our community has money. Like, we, like, per capita, we are the richest people, whatever. We control this, we control that. And it's like, I don't know if it'll work well. And it's a crazy rich Asians, And then before that, they were like, not since Joy Luck Club. I'm like, it took you guys 25 years to like restart this formula. Like, Joy Luck Club worked out. Crazy Rich Asians worked out. What was happening in the 25 years in between here that you thought that this might not work out?
They were 10%. They were making money on white people. White people were making money with white people, and and that's what's happening in 25 years. They won't give a fuck. They're just like, you're not gonna make money on Asian people. It's making money on their own. And
but like, when did I want to know, like, when did it not work with Asian people on camera? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's a good question. It goes back to maybe a deliberate.
Yeah, like I feel like it has to be deliberate. Like when you're gonna make a movie about the Great Wall and cast Matt Damon, right? Like, that's a conscious decision to be like, yeah, Matt Damon's the guy for us, Or like, how hard is it to like go do CGI on somebody to like make their eyes smaller, to put Tom Cruise, or make a white Goku? You're just like, that takes a lot of mental gymnastics. And maybe like I'm hoping somebody will like show me, and they're like, yeah, these 10 times that we try to cast an all Asian cast backfired, and that's why it's not, and that's why we didn't do it for 10 years, or 20 years. But yeah, to make these like conscious decisions.
I think another sort of addition to this formula and this topic is also maybe that we didn't have the trained craftsmen in acting, in writing, and because our parents wouldn't let us do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that representation is chopped down from the fucking get-go inside of our own house, our own household.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you got to go do
Yeah.
the other white collar shit. You can't go do, what we need in the entertainment industry. We don't need that representation. We need to fucking survive. We're like, we just got off the boat and we
Yeah.
just we need to eat.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like even I talk about this with the guys sometimes. It's like, okay, even if you had a great project right now, you and I, we sat down, we wrote a great movie, and we got this like badass, like Minari sort of like, movie. Well, where's your Stephen Yoon in our community? Where's our Vietnamese Stephen Yoon?
Yeah.
Where is that guy?
Yeah. That's, yeah.
Well, so
No,
that's why
it's
we
true.
need
It's
Matt
like,
Damons of the world, right?
no, exactly. But it's like I loved whatever one that was going around when they like photoshopped John Cho into like every like major motion poster. I'm like, yeah, it sucks though. It sucks that it's not one person, right? It's like you have like three people, and if they can't, they're like, Stephen Chow, like, unless you can be the next born,
Yeah.
we're gonna take you out of all of these things, or everybody's like comedic relief, and it's frustrating because it's like LA, it's supposed to be such a progressive place, right? Like we are supposed to be, this is the city that is bringing America into hell, supposed with all our,
Yeah.
with all our heathenism and progressives, and it's like this is not even like talked about. Like this is not even a blip on the radar.
Well, at the end of the day, I think it's just money drives everything. Metrics and money, drives things, and it just takes a while to sort of get things into place from an Asian sort of like from the Asian players. They just we've gotta grease the wheels and make things work on our end.
Yeah. Thing is, we have it now, right? Like we have it now. We have money, we have power, we have VCs and angel corps and all these people that are going to help push this narrative. So now it's about making sure that we just hit it together, like that everybody comes in and represents, and this whole community effort of supporting each other. And like like as much as I hate talking about those things, it's like, yeah, this is kind of what we need. We got to be, it sucks to have to be so deliberate about it in the beginning to make it go.
Yeah, for sure. But people like Rosalina and Bao and Anderson and all these guys, that they're very focused on the community building and having Vietnamese people be put on the map, and it's happening. These guys are really making it happen. What can we go back to sort of the work that you do with Apple? It's like, do you do any actual management, like of his tour schedule or putting that side together?
Yeah. I do a lot of like the calendar work. Like that used to be somebody, and then at some point it just became me. So there's like for the calendar schedule, like the P's will be like, these are the dates that we're looking at, let us know what you got. And so then we all kind of put our own calendars in there. And then we just kind of negotiate and make it work on what makes sense for everybody. Some projects, like a lot of times it's going to be the P stuff. And like they're like, they want to pay us this much to do this gig in Europe. And we're like, all right, well, let's move this date and we'll come back and let's do that. And then we'll fly back. We'll take a layover, we'll go do this other thing.
And do you have to go with Apple on all, like every trip?
No. The P's as a machine, like I'll go once in a while, but they've been doing this for 20 some odd years. They kind of have a whole setup, and with festivals now it's even easier just because it's like you got 50 minutes, some other management groups building the stage and most of the lighting and stuff like that. So you just show up with your costumes, give us, tell us what you're going to do, tell us what the lighting is, and we'll make it work. So music in that way has been easier. That's why so many people tour now, right? Because you don't even have to, you market, like you're still going to market, but it's not in the same levels, right?
Yeah. One of my questions that we had talked about earlier was the changing landscape of the music business. And it feels like the more I talk to you, I think about your project management and having these ancillary streams of income for Apple. wouldn't probably be so important in the artist's life if, the old ways of making money in the business was still around. Like before streaming, they sold DVDs, CDs, right? They just sold actual products. But now with the absence of all that and streaming taking over and, really depleting the revenue streams, guys like you having to come in to brainstorm and now create these ancillary, it's much bigger for a person like you. But has it changed to the point where all these projects are building bigger streams of money than the actual CDs that were sold back in the day before streaming? Is it making up for it?
Yeah. It doesn't. It doesn't. Like what really kind of matters when, even back then when they were selling CDs, right, was if they had a label and what the label held. At some point in time, the label held much more power, right? Because there wasn't this technology. You couldn't just go on a DistroKid and put your music out there, and radio was, this huge governing force of what was cool. And now, not so much, right? Like it's still helpful and it's still great to be on the radio, but it's not, like Tekashi 6ix9ine does these crazy numbers, and it was a bunch of kids, and it's like, but if you don't get tuned into Tekashi 6ix9ine, then you can avoid him almost completely, right? Outside of like billboards and like static ads, like you don't have to encounter that world. And so these other platforms, I think what people in like my position do is figure out like, how do you make the most of your time in the spotlight, because all of these people, like the Ps were probably like one of the most like commercialized acts in the 2000s, right? Like they were like introducing me when I landed in O'Hare, just like it's the Black Eyed Peas and Welcome to Chicago. And you're like, how? Who thought to pay you to do this? And now it's like, okay, well, while you have this platform, it's been it's great that it's been democratized in this way. But the physical, like what you make on a stream sucks, right?
Yeah.
Like for 1,000 streams, you make 8 cents, and that's 8 cents for the whole pie, and that's to be cut with the writers and the producers and the vocalists. It sucks, but there are so many other avenues to recompensate for that stuff, and it can be cheaper. So yeah, touring is still great. Touring has always been everybody's. That's why you see bands that'll just come out, like these are like reunion bands that are like, yeah, Guns N' Roses is coming back. They've been broken up for 10 years, but you can't say no to Coachella,
Yeah.
So that stuff. So in that way, it's been better for artists. I think like if you're just trying to look at the physical views of what your streams are and how much you're getting paid, that sucks. But like, I hope, but also like a lot more artists are like, I think they're trying to come in as a much more complete person with like a lot more hyphens to their names, So then it becomes about collaborating with other people and getting stuff out there. It's about making products, and it's about being an actor when you can, and just building your own personal brand. And it's still a great avenue for that.
Yeah. How much of the P's work did you know before coming in? How much of their catalog, their library, did you kind of?
No, I knew. I really liked their first 2 albums before I ever knew them, and that was sort of like the 2 that nobody listens to. That was before Fergie, and so that was like, I used to be into breakdancing and stuff, and I like loved that kind of music, and so I loved those 2 albums. I knew like the singles, like I obviously knew Where's the Love, and I knew some of the otI admittedly did not know as much as I probably could have. Like I remember when I first started working with Apple, I was talking to a friend of mine. He's like, tell them thank you for making Yesterday such, like, it's one of my favorites. I'm like, what song is this? And they were like, you don't know Yesterday? And I was like, no. No, so I'm like here like downloading and learning everything about them.
Yeah, and
And
that was my next question. How much downloading and how much learning and how much is sort of infiltrating the whole brand did you have to do in order to move the ball for Apple?
a lot. I mean, I just had to like really learn the music that I didn't um know. Like I liked the music, but it was never my like favorite type of music. But they have such hardcore fans, you know, that you have to that you're like, oh, you this person, you know, in Italy cannot know more about their music than me. That's, you know, this cannot happen. So I
Yeah.
had to like really learn that process for a while, and it just kind of absorbed myself in all the music and all the like backstories and all the like, you know, you become a representative of theirs, you know, of the camp that you gotta just kind of know all these backstories.
What what can you say to the idea of like there is something definite about the success of a group like the Peas, their longevity, like Aerosmith, or is there something that you can say that there that you can pinpoint and go, here's why these guys are the shit. Here's why they've existed this long. Is working with this within that world for this long now, can you quantify or qualify it in your mind?
I don't know if I could I don't know if I could quantify it to anything. I don't want to be lazy and just say, oh, it's hard work and determination. Like there's a real backstory to them. Like a lot of people in Hollywood really work, right? Like there's no shortage of that. Um, Being true and making like really timeless things, the piece did a really good job of like sticking to a memory of people. And I think like the really longevity groups have that, right? Like, where's the love hit at this perfect moment of like America's consciousness and trying to decide, you know, what were we doing in the Middle East? And then I got a feeling hits in a way that Obama gets elected and
Mm,
the country feels like it's in a better place. And you know, and they figured out that kind of cheat code to be attached to people's memories.
great answer, man.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's what they've like collectively figured out. And it's you know it's crazy watching them make music. Because I sometimes I get a little upset. I'm like, some of these words are lazy. Like you clearly are lazy about this song right now, like lyrically, but then like production wise, they're just like, nope. And they'll they figured out the formula, and you're like, all right, cool, beautiful, beautiful stuff right there. Yeah.
It's a great answer. I never. It's like zeitgeist, right? They got a direct line to the zeitgeist. Like, if not
Mhm.
even just creating zeitgeist or
Yeah. I think that's what I think they've kind of sorted that out with amongst themselves and how to just kind of constantly hit that. And yeah, yeah I would hope, I don't know, like there's, I'm trying to think. It's weird to think like how do I say it? Never mind. Yeah, that's, that's kind of an answer.
and what about the longevity of staying together and working together for that long? I mean, it must be difficult, right? Three dudes, four people.
It, yeah, three dudes, 20 some odd years, you know, and going back to our beginning of like Chance, like for Apple, like Will was the first person in America that he met, you know?
Oh
Like,
shit, really?
yeah, like when Will gets, like when Apple gets brought to America for the first real time, like when he actually like gets adopted and brought here, um, his adoptive father talks to his friend, and his friend's the neighborhood mom, like for everybody, right? She's like the cul-de-sac mom. And so she has her son stay home from a couple of days to hang out with Apple, and that person happens to be Will.
Where is
Like,
this happening?
huh?
Where's this happening?
This is happening in East LA, in
Oh
Boyle Heights.
shit, it's here.
Yeah, it's in Boyle Heights. That's where they meet. Yeah, very first person that Apple meets, you know. And for and it's crazy because like for Apple, he's like, yeah, I'm gonna trust Will with my life. Like that dude, that dude like was like, I didn't even know English until I met this dude like really well. And in a year or a couple of years has me signed to a record label. He signed to Easy E, you know? And I think they saw so much together in those early stages, you know, that was like, yeah, I went from like raising water buffalo to
Oh no, this is serious, like for real, like going
yeah,
through that landscape.
yeah, going like literally water, like great, you know, raising water buffalo. Like Apple will tell stories about like having to bury his homework on one side of the river so that it wouldn't flood over, doing it, burying it underneath, crossing the river, coming back in the morning, undigging it and bringing it in. Like that was his childhood. And to go from there to doing the Super Bowl, you know, it's like no amount of tension or, you know, creative differences or whatever, or this shit is ever going to break that.
Yeah, and that's the kind of shit that like propels, like when you go through that kind of life and you're given an opportunity to do something like this,
Yeah.
it's just so valuable.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, exactly. He, you know, he figured out a way to, he was legally, well, he's more than legally blind. He's blind, you know, he was blind for so long that it was like, you couldn't even, can you imagine being like blind and growing up in a, you know, in a province of the Philippines, and it was like, the other option of what your life might have been is definitely not this, right? And it's still racist. Like, I'm like, and you're half black. Like, even this, like, even your skin tone, like, life would have been a difficult struggle if this didn't, you know.
how did they how did he get discovered, or how did he get to the US?
He was on, you know, those like dollar a day kid things,
Yeah.
where like he was one of those kids. So he was on TV, you know, and they like in the like late 70s, early 80s, and they're like, for a dollar a day, you can, you know, give this kid some food. And he was one of those kids. He got selected, and he would write letters to his sponsor. And then they created a rapport and stuff like that. And eventually Apple wished to be adopted and brought to the States, and his adoptive father, Mr. Hudgens, obliged, got him here, got him to some of the best ophthalmologists, you know, to see what they could do about his eyes, and he just stayed.
I'm like
And
in shock right now. I had no
yeah,
idea.
yeah. No one really knows those stories. Like they're kind of like stuff in the backdrops, but yeah, like it's a lot of hard work, but it's a lot of luck. It's a lot of luck to get that like literally one in a million. Like he's hit one in a million so many times now. Yeah.
Yeah, you make it makes you wonder, like, what the fuck is going on in the universe of things happening for a human being, right?
Yeah.
Because you see it like happening to one person, a million, one in a million chance, and it happens like 10, 30, 20, 40 times to some person. Like Yu Jing is the same way. She's this big actress in the Vietnamese war. She's like our Meryl Streep. And I talked to her for 4 hours, and you see the pattern, just constantly being lucky, just being at the literally right time, right place so many times of her life. You know, crossing the street, gets plucked by a Hollywood director in Saigon. It's like, yeah. And there's a lot of beautiful women. I mean, you know, in
Yeah.
Vietnam at that time, but why her? You know?
Yeah. No, you get it feels like it's so often like that, right? Like you're saying, like it's just you just happen to be on the right side of the street. You just happen to get the right adoptive father. You just happen to like my parents came, my dad, it was telling me during the waning days of the war, he had like left the post to go back to Saigon and check on his family like the 27th or 28th of April, right? And the North was advancing faster than anybody thought. And he was like, I just happened to come home to go check on the family for a day. And then suddenly it's like, all right, put it together, jump on a, yeah, we're jumping on a boat. We're saying goodbye to everything we know. And it's like, yeah, what if you were hungover? Like, what if it took one extra day? What if, you had a tire break or any other circumstance that could have happened?
But if you think about it, there's for every one of your dad or for every one of Kuching or Apple, there's a bazillion people who never get out too.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so, you have to like constantly kind of remind yourself, or every so often remind yourself of like what lucky set of circumstances got you here. Like I have we call him Gil, but I'm not sure how much of a Gil he actually is, who's in Vietnam and probably grew up in was in a very similar situation where my parents were when they were living there, and none of no breaks hit him, right? Like he when we were trying to send him shoes one day a couple years ago, and it was my father had passed and we were just trying to move some stuff. And so I call him and I'm like, what size feet are you? And he's like, I don't know. I've never been able to buy a pair of shoes. And I was like, oh shit. I'm like staring at like this like massive wall of shoes I have over here, like feeling like the biggest jackass. Like, what do you mean you've never measured your feet? And he was like, I've never had the opportunity to measure my feet for it. And you're like, all right, well, I'm going to send you like 4 different size stuff and you tell me what you want. You tell me what fits, and then I will go proceed to send more, and it's just like, yeah, very well could have been life. That was a couple of different decisions, just crazy.
Yeah. I had another guest tell me a story. It's the same thing. He literally, like, people were running in the streets towards the port. And he was running with everybody because bombs are going off. And they were just all running towards the water. And then people were just like getting to this boat, and he just walked onto the boat. Next minute, the boat goes and leaves, and he finds himself in Thailand, and he's like a refugee now. And he just left his family.
Holy shit.
Fucking like 7 years later or 8 years later, he's like graduating Berkeley. Yeah, it's crazy shit. I have him coming on. I have that episode releasing in a few weeks. It's just the weirdest thing.
That's crazy.
Like there was no family connection. There's no like plan. It was just like people running, and you run with the people, and they're like, all of a sudden, you're like, oh, there's a ship. The door's opening up, and then you jump in, and you find yourself in the water, and 24 hours later, you're in Thailand or whatever.
Oh my God.
A few years later, like, he gets a few months later, he arrives in the Berkeley area, and, he stays with the family, a Catholic family or whatever that sponsors him. And then he becomes, a student at a community college, transfers into Berkeley. And, next thing you know, he's a graduate of Berkeley, UC Berkeley. And it's just, he said in a matter of 8 years, it was just like, went from that to that. And it was just luck.
What?
Yeah. I'm beginning to see this a lot. I'm just beginning to see how crazy, and it makes you, the more you hear these sort of stories about mankind and about how lucky or unlucky people get, you just have to like release it and let it go and just live in gratitude constantly. Just be like, okay, I'm just going to accept what comes, just do the best I can and not even trip out and compare. Cause I lived my first easily 45 years just constantly comparing. Why did my brother get that? Why did my neighbor get that? Why did my classmate get? And it's like, what a waste of fucking energy.
It really is. And it's just, you learn levels to so many things, right? So like even the things that you may be like talking about, like you're like, why did my brother get this? And it's like that. It's like both of these things mean absolutely nothing to somebody at this level, or everything to somebody at this lower level, And it's just like, I've never really like complained about money again when I was like, I'm never making as rich as some of these houses I've been in. I'm just never like, I'm gonna stop trying to think that this is the win. Like I need to hit whatever infinite number that is so I can buy this thing,
But to answer that too, to address what you just said, like literally in 3 years, you could be like the guy that brings the next J Ray or whatever, and you create all this like energy, being that person that brings all of this Vietnamese product from Vietnam to the United States, you know, because of the work that you've done. And some lucky situation, somebody calls you, sees this episode. I don't know.
Yeah.
You never know. And then all of a sudden, 5 years from now, you're sitting in a house that you were looking at, like when you were coming up and going like, I'd never have a house like this, but I am here right now in this motherfucking massive house, you know?
Yeah. No, totally.
But you
totally.
can't taste it almost. That's what I've learned. You just can't even.
Yeah. But like, no, that makes total sense. But it's like, it takes really like accepting offers to all of these things and just like letting go of the insecurities, you know, that like, or like feelings that somebody's too small. Like so often, like for all the times that like we can talk about, like we found a J-Ray or something like that, there are like mixtapes of like kids I'm holding on that like blew up one day, right? And I like for whatever reason got too busy to play it, you know, when they were like younger, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I feel like a moron right now. You know, I'm just like, what do you have to say to that? I don't know. Like I was project managing something else. This email came in that just like whatever, like, you know, I just didn't get to it. I'm sorry. And now I'm like, that person is that person, you know. And sometimes like earlier I'd feel like I was bigwigging it, you know, and like, all right, I'm not gonna bother with that. And now I'm like, oh, I thought I knew this market that I had no idea, you know.
Wow. Do you and Apple, are you guys on the lookout for new talent and stuff and developing new talent at this point?
Always. Yeah, we're always taking people's like mixtapes or songs or whatever like beats they produce, because I just think like the music in Asia has moved. Like we're looking all over. We'll look anywhere in the world. You can come from South Africa and have a really great beat, and I'm interested. But Asia in particular, just because that's, you know, that's home base for us. In the Philippines, like hip hop has moved in such a way that I'm like really hopeful. You know, they seem to be in this like
golden era.
Yeah, like that like early 90s like Tribe Called Quest feeling stuff, you know. And it's like, oh, you guys are having fun with it right now. This hasn't been bastardized yet, you know, but experience this euphoria, enjoy it, but like let's be part of it. Vietnam, like we're always looking. Like the first time I came back to Vietnam after being a teacher, I was working for Apple, and it was just it was crazy. Like there was so much more music, and maybe I just wasn't looking as hard before, you know. But then I was like, oh, there's music everywhere now. And there's like live music that's not just covers and not just what feels like Paris by Night, you know. Not to like knock on Paris by Night, it just wasn't my avenue. But I was like, oh, there's like young people like that are really embracing live music at this point. They're different. Have
you heard of Rap Viet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Competition. Yeah.
Yeah. I see Rap. Jenny, when I saw her Instagram stories one day, and that's what got me really upset about this whole quarantine, because she was at Rap Viet and a bunch of other people in Vietnam were all there, and I'm like quarantining at home, just like, what did Vietnam get right that you can all get together and do Rap Viet? And I'm sitting here watching reruns of sports, you know, like just waiting.
Yeah, it's like, okay, that's that narrative like of Vietnam sort of like being behind or whatever. Like people need to realize and start to analyze that shit. Okay, so like if you thought that, you know, and I speak for like a lot of people in my family who thought that the Vietnamese country, the government was lying, you know, they don't have this shit under control. Oh yeah, they don't have it under control. Then why the fuck are they open and we're not?
Yeah, exactly.
I always brought that up. I'm like, you can't really lie about this. My brother's sitting in Vietnam telling me, no, man, we're going to the movies. We eat, or at the restaurant. No, the fucking shit's bad. Everybody's masked up, you know, wearing the mask. But they're doing something fucking right.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't demonize the mask. But like one of the great things about Vietnam, and, you know, there's like they're building infrastructure now, right? So they get to use today's technology to do everything correctly. And it's like you have more information. As long as you like do it correctly as you're going through this, you're going to have a very sustainable city and some, you know, some great infrastructure, and you guys can seem to obey laws correctly.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, like here, I think there's such a, you know, like it's like a saying, like, it's trapped in 75, like for a lot of people here, you know.
Absolutely.
And so like I would come home. I remember like coming home and seeing like my dad's like war buddies and stuff like that after I like lived there, and they were like asking, had I been tortured, you know? And I was like, nope, not any of that. Like at worst, like I agreed to pay like $30 extra a month because I was like, I'm not gonna hang the flag. Like you just know that now. Like when Bamintang comes around, I'm not hanging the flag, I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna go to the like random ward meeting, you know, that you might like you have the ability to call me in for. Like I'm just not gonna do that. So just landlord, if it's gonna cost an extra or whatever, just please get me out of any of these obligations now. And they were like, and other than that, it was fine. You know what I mean? Like I was like, yeah, it was a great place. And like people like get caught up on like these very like strict like confined words of like socialism or communism or capitalism, like it like they're like black and white and all encompassing, and you're like, I went to public school my entire life. That's as socialist as all of this gets. You know.
Absolutely.
Right. And I'm like, and I had Starbucks and McDonald's over there, and I paid in money, so I don't know what we're really talking about, you know.
There's nuances in the political landscape everywhere you go, whether it's in like a band of 4 people, 3 people, like the Black Eyed Peas. There's like these political nuances between the members, all the way up to the society level, as in Vietnam or the US. There's no place that's like either this or that. It's like there's so much mixture of complexity that we can't. And that's what I'm learning with all the interviews with the Vietnamese people. It's like we think it's like one. I used to think that it was just like the culture was a certain way, with the way that my mom and dad saw things. Oh my God, am I learning that it's just there's so many different levels to the people that came from Vietnam to the United States. There's like the really elite, entitled, all the way down to the farmer who was like, you know, everybody has their own weird, you know, story and becoming American. And it's not just like a dividing line now, like you're a Republican Vietnamese or you're a liberal Vietnamese. It's just so many shades in between. And I just hope that we can expose sort of all of these narratives as the years go on. It's the most important thing.
Yeah, no, that's a really great way of putting it. You know, like I've never understood that complex, you know, like that, like people are so multifaceted with so many, you know, responsibilities and moments and like that shape their life, that there's no way you fit into any of these boxes. No, yeah. You know, it's not a single box. And so this like 2-tier system thing is absolute bullshit. You're like, so, you know, like I have to like all of these things. They're like, yes. Well, which one do you like the most? And you're like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I grew up with very conservative parents, you know, and I feel like a lot of those things are still in me, but I'm also not identifying with, you know, gay marriage. Like, that's just like, you don't have to put me in that box because I check these other boxes or whatever. Yeah. And so Vietnam is like, I wish I've had a really hard time getting my friends to go visit personally, because they have lived kind of to what their parents' description, and to go back to film, and because they haven't seen anything in film really that, or in anything that makes them think otherwise. You know what I mean? Like they might see the big Texaco building or something, or and be like, oh, that's nice, you know, or that's a cool thing, or like what, like these random like 2-second snapshots that they might see, but nothing has like driven the them to like want to go visit it. So they still have this very stagnant view of the country, and to like live in it for a while and to get to see it is like, I watched buildings go up in weeks. It was fascinating to see, you know, like the turnover rate on like, you want a new building? Like, yeah.
We got you.
Yeah, exactly. Like that one in the one in District 2, that like 88-story building or whatever that. Yeah. Where did that come from in the last, like I just remember landing, like flying into Saigon and being like, what's that over there? And they were like, oh yeah, that's the new one. And it's like, and it's not just that all the District 2, you know, is built out. Highways are built out. And it's really a great set. Like I want people to see it, especially as it changes. Like you're not going to be able to remember this version of Vietnam anymore.
Yeah. I went to school with a bunch of Japanese kids when I was in elementary school in the 80s. And I remember they had this thing called like Nisei Week, which is like when the Japanese, they count the generations. They're like first generation came in the whatever, but way back in the day. And then you had the kids that were in the 80s, like my age, and they were like fourth generation or whatever. So they would celebrate the generational sort of like the strata where you were at, you know, but the disconnect, like the older I got, I realized the disconnect between the Japanese that were living in the United States that became Americans after 3 to 4 generations. It terrified me to think about my life and being that disconnected from my ancestral roots, being born in America, right? Like you and I are born in America. I cringe when I think about how disconnected the Japanese at that time were disconnected from their own sort of lineage of, but they were, you know, they stuck very much to a it was weird. Their parents sort of really tried to stick to the traditional routines that they had in their culture, but they weren't, you know, they were so far removed from anything from Japan that I was like terrified. I was like, oh my God, I still speak my language. I still cook the food. And you know, today I think about things in terms of my cultural identity, but I can't imagine my kids, they're being the third generation and being removed from it. And that terrifies me. And I think that's why I do the work that I do now with the Vietnamese podcast. It's like some sort of genetic DNA link to the culture, some cultural DNA to Vietnam and the motherland. To have it preserved in this digital format is so important for me.
Oh no, the work that you're doing is really, it's actually it's tremendous, and like building these stories out like in this time frame, because there's going to be this huge disconnect. Talking to my brother-in-law recently, and he was like, you guys realize like you should figure out like that whole, I forget what it's called, but like they do it in Ireland and stuff where it's like connect with your heritage and stuff like that. And so people can like from here can go visit in Vietnam and figure out who the rest of the people are and where this comes from, you know, because it my fear is that it's being like all of these stories and all of these moments are being held on by aging people. You know what I mean? Like my mom, I remember the first time she visited me in Vietnam, she like took me to like every ancestral home, right? And everything that you could see. She was like, because when she goes, like no one else has it. Like there's not a clue, right? Like and because they don't have real maps, they're like, you make a right at that coffee shop up there. And it's like that coffee shop better be there forever, you know, for me to know where my ancestral home is and where those and where my, you know, great grandfather is buried. And yeah, like that it happens quick, right? Because especially in the first generation of people, I feel like you're like, I grew up in a place where there weren't many Asian people. There were like maybe 6 of us in the school, you know, in Ontario. And so a lot of it was like, you know how to not be bullied, you know? You do not bring rice to school. You do not do this. You dress American, you know? And like for me, like moving to Vietnam is kind of an extreme case of what it takes to like try to re-educate yourself, you know? Like that just doesn't really happen as much, I guess. So when I talk to my friends, it's like, it's weird because like we like know some things. Like my best friend and I are Vietnamese, and we had never really talked about being Vietnamese or what the culture was. It was always just kind of like, yeah, but we'll go eat gum hen. Like that's what makes us feel like we're authentic, right? We're like gonna eat some real Vietnamese food. And but yeah, I never like it, but it's never been about like preserving the culture and anything like as what you're doing on this podcast, you know, and like being able to like really tell stories and amplify so that you don't have to eat a bowl of gum hen, or you don't, like, we are all connected in this diaspora far larger than.
But the beauty too is that there are guys like you that are working with a cultural context in your head, being Vietnamese, but you're operating way outside and into the mainstream of American culture, and creating products and creating sort of these revenue streams that are way beyond our cultural norms, and with the possibility and the potential to bring all of that sort of thing, all of the knowledge that you've gotten back into the Vietnamese world at one point. And I always hold out hope for people like you to, to bring it back to our country, to Vietnam.
Yeah, I hope that's what I can do. And I hope that's, I hope that there are other me's out there that are like trying to do this. And I hope that there are other yous out there. And it's just, it's like we have all the infrastructure to do something really, really grand, and I trying to figure it out correctly the first time, like you don't get many chances to like really be in the spot. And so you're like, okay, well, how do you share it? And it's like, especially when you look at infrastructure there, and you're like, Vietnam is in this great moment right now, I think, where it's just like, it's accepting, businesses are working, but there's still enough open land. Yeah. There's still enough like people are just like, it was the last 10 years that they really got the internet on some grand scale. You know what I mean? So you can carve out what they're looking at and what is good. You know what I mean? So it's like, you might as well put some really good shit. Like if you're gonna watch it, watch some good shit.
What are you've been to the Philippines a bunch of times. What is the difference and the similarities between the Philippines and Vietnam today?
Vietnam and the Philippines, there's a lot. The similarities are like it's really crowded, and there's a lot of pride that goes on. There's a lot of pride in the cuisine. Manila is like mostly like exclusively Catholic, whereas in Vietnam it's a little 50-50. And the Philippines still feels like it feels like America 10 years ago. Like you still see Shakey's, you still see Kenny Rogers. There are parts of it that are so brand spanking new that there's like BGC, which is the neighborhood there, feels like Manhattan, just clean, just very clean. There's some really, really good food like Republic here in LA. Mm-hmm. They have a couple out there, same owners. They made something else, but way cheaper. It's like yeah. So the head chefs from Republic, one of them is Filipino and one of them is Vietnamese, right? But they have a place out there called Wildflower. There's a couple of them, and it's for $10 you can eat Republic food. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Like access to really good street food is prevalent in both, but Philippines, like the traffic is so overwhelming in Manila. It's just because they're on the cars. So it's like if all of the motorbikes in Vietnam were cars. So now you're just not moving. You know what I mean? There's no swimming in the sea. There is no, none of that. But they have a lot of languages in the Philippines, which is a little difficult because there's I forget how many. There's 7,000 islands, and so there's like a couple hundred dialects. You know what I mean? And then you're just never gonna get it all. But if that one feels a little closer to America, and Vietnam feels a little closer to Asia. That makes any sense.
No, it makes it totally. What's your day-to-day like? I know it changes probably during COVID, but like before COVID, what's
before COVID, a lot of it is emails. Like I'm in talks with what happens in LA, what happens in Manila, what happens in London a lot. Those are like three of the time zones that kind of have to be. And unfortunately, they're all like 8 hours apart from one another. So you're kind of just on all the time. It's a lot of social media in the beginning and trying to figure out branding strategies. And then it's a lot of like, I'm trying to think. That's a lot of it. That's a lot of phone calls, really, unless I'm somewhere. And then if I'm in a city, then it's how many meetings can I do? And we're trying to work on, I work on music, but it's not my main source of work, right? Like Apple's been in music so much longer than I have that I'm not going to pretend to know.
When you say you work in music, what do you actually, you're just listening to see what to move forward?
Sometimes, I mean, a lot of times it's like trying to figure out deals, right? Like percentage points and splits and all, and like the paperwork side of music and releasing music. And then it's also kind of trying to listen to say, who do you think is going to be good? Who do you think is next? You know, and then negotiating partnership deals. Like when we work with brands now, a lot of my time is spent trying to create winning situations for both sides, right? That goes beyond just you can have them in a commercial, you can use this likeness, you know, for the duration of 3 months. We will do 2 social media posts or some shit like that. And a lot of it is like, well, how do we build something together? You know, how do we create a longer lasting partnership in all of this? Because I think that's kind of key. So a lot of my day is spent.
Where did you learn that? Where, I mean, you know, there's yeah.
I don't know where I learned that. I think that was just kind of, I think that's this generation's though. Like the fortunate thing is because I'm so new into this, I don't have like a world of experience that I have to like fall back on. So it's a lot of looking at the entire 360 of an experience of a brand's experience, you know? So it's like, how do you, like I said, like, how do you create something that actually makes sense instead of just having him hold the bottle? Because that can be very tiresome. You know, it's like, how do you input parts of your story and parts of your narrative into each of these things that we are creating so that they can feel more authentic to you? Because for Apple, a lot of it is like, he's not going to be the greatest at like memorizing a script. Like that's not his game, you know, but he wants to be able to talk about something freely and, you know, and be long-winded about it. And so if you just tell him like, read this tagline, you know, keep it together, it gets difficult and very forcing because he can't see. There's like this, like it looks bad because he has to read like this, you know, if he does see, so you can't do that. You can't have a teleprompter. And if it's memorized, you can tell it's like kind of just, you know, go and drink this Coca-Cola, you know, it just doesn't, it never works. And so, and for us, it's about getting more points, you know, it's about like, there's never going to be enough. I don't want to say ever going to be enough money. There's rarely enough money in an endorsement deal, you know, without some back end, you know, so I'll take minimal things up front so that I can
Work the back end.
So I can get the back end. Yeah. George Lucas, right? Like whatever, keeping on that merch was like, set him up for life. I'm like, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. There's a lot of knowledge that you have to bring on a general level to the position that you're in before you even got to where you are to even have the conversation that you have with Apple.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's about like having to like remember all of those experiences, right? And like try to learn from, I think we were talking about that gap on Friday, that whole gap story. And just going like, oh, so but these are the things that you can do well, right? So how do you do them well, you know? And it's like, and for Asia, it's like being able to be like, I know somebody in Vietnam manufacturing that can make this happen, right? Like how long do you really want to push this product from this other company until we can just do it on our own and keep the whole pie, you know?
What is your ultimate sort of wish for your life? Like, do you have a vision of sort of the work that you want to do? Is this, you know, I know it sounds like you're having a great time, But is there something sort of a grander picture?
Um, I don't know. I think I play around with it all the time. I think right now the grand picture is just design, and the commerce of design, and connecting the dots from everybody that I meet and creating this infrastructure that that gets me paid, but gets everybody else paid as well, right? To being like, let's just own everything. And for us and for Jessica, like this becomes like the real first experiment, right? Of saying, it's great is if you don't have to learn the lesson in your 30s or your 40s, that you should do, and people are doing it. Like Rihanna is doing it at a young enough age still, right? Where she had done these moves and is then going, oh, I can just make it on my own, right? Like I can make my own shoes, or I can make my own bikinis or whatever and keep the whole thing. And taking all of those experiences and relationships in Asia, and particularly Vietnam, and taking all that and then reapplying it here, because I just like design. Like I really like commercial design though. I like products and I like all that stuff. And I used to feel really weird and guilty about how much I liked things, until going like, oh, I should do something about that. Yeah. And so like, how do we create all of those things and, and create experiences for people, yeah, I don't like, I probably won't do this for the rest of my life, working with Apple, at least directly. But I hope to, I hope to to work with Apple in some partial sense, even if we're just partners on projects, and telling and crafting stories, because this is really a time for us, it's a time for Asian people to really to tell their own stories now, and to tell it through everything, products and movies and music.
Yeah, I have one last question. It sounds like you have you've had a hectic schedule, and you're married. How does it affect your relationship with the family life when you're so busy? It's not a 9-to-5 job, it sounds like, especially 3 different time zones. And
yeah, she's been Mia has been very great about a lot of it. It is a struggle though, right? She's a physician, and so her life is much more structured. Even her long days are structured, so like she might have a 12-hour day, but can tell you exactly that it's gonna be a 12-hour day. And I'm like, not as great about that. I'm like, I can be home at 9 and then be home at 2. And, that's always a difficult one. And, I kind of have to remind them, like, I'm not the only one in this. Like, I promise it's not just me that's like terrible about time. It's everybody who's ever lived in my world.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
To keep this, but I'm sure directors and stuff are like this too, right? Like if you think it's a 12-hour shoot day and it's an 18-hour shoot day, because you're trying to get this in, or you're waiting for the lighting, or you're doing whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's a challenge, and hopefully communication kind of keeps through, and you show good intent, even if you're awful about timing and you're missing things and you're cooking for a week because you're like, hey, this is the leftover pile of food, like I hope I'm home in time for dinner. Might not be. You might be home, whatever. It's gonna be interesting when things open up again and travel becomes a thing, and that's gonna be weird for sure.
Very strange time. Yeah, but I can't wait. Can't wait for that to. I hope you and I get to go to Vietnam together. And
seriously,
yeah.
I hope to do Formula One in Vietnam again. That was the time I was supposed to meet Rosalina before she was just casually, like when it was in Hanoi last year, right before the lockdown.
Yeah, but did they end up having it?
I don't think so.
No, they canceled it. It was like supposed to be in April.
Yeah, are they going to postpone it and bring it back though? Because I will be there for that. Like if they show up with Formula One in Hanoi.
Yeah, a group of us had planned to go.
Yeah.
We were like ready to go, and then lockdown happened, and we're like, okay, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But
I hope I get to travel there with you, though. It'd be fun.
that would be fun. Yeah. And there's always a crew of people in Vietnam, because now it's like after 20 years of, my brother's been there for almost 20 years, and guys like Bao and Jenny and, Ham and Lynn, all the partners, they're entrenched there, so it's like, there's literally like two homes for entertainment people.
Yeah.
Saigon, and there's LA, and we're very, there's always somebody in LA, and there's always somebody in Saigon. There's always a brotherhood, a sisterhood of creatives that we, have dinners, and it's a very tight knit group of people that wonderful human beings.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, I can't wait to go again. And jonesing for it for a minute now.
Yeah. But Dan, thank you so much for your time and being open. And, I hope that soon, in a few months, or you got some more good news or interesting things, and we come back up on the show and chop it up again, just like we did today. Today is just a start. We're just getting our toes wet, and there's many more years ahead of us to talk about product and things that are developing in the creative space.
Awesome. Thank you for the time. Thanks for having me, Ken. Thank you for what you're doing, and hope to chop it up soon.
Thanks, Dan.
I'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. The Vietnamese is produced by Brittany Tran and Javier Proenza. Special thanks to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast. You can also find us on YouTube, where you can subscribe, like, and comment. Please rate and give us a review wherever you find our podcasts. Thanks again for listening.